Here's another poisonous plant, the delphinium. The delphinium, or as it's also known as the larkspur, is a very common garden plant that's often used in decorative places because it looks very, very nice. However, like many other common garden plants, it is also very toxic. All parts of the plants are poisonous. It is more poisonous when it's younger, so as it just comes up out of the ground and starts flowering, and gradually loses its toxicity as the plant ages. However, again, all parts of it are toxic, including the flowers, leaves, stem, etc. The most common way of poisoning is through ingestion of it being eaten, but you can also get skin irritation from coming into too close of contact with it, especially on mucous membranes such as the mouth and eyeballs. The main toxic compound in this is called methyl-lycopene, and it is a diterpene alkaloid found in the plant. Now, the compounds in this plant have both cardiotoxic and neuromuscular effects, which means they affect the heart and cause the heart to stop functioning properly, as well as mess with the motor response and your motor symptoms, so you have movement issues as well. Kind of the early symptoms of poisoning include things like gastrointestinal issues, as well as increased agitation and increased heart and respiratory rates, so your breathing and your heart rate gets a lot faster. Later symptoms progress to, again, very, very rapid heart rates, as well as tremors and seizures occasionally. And if not treated, it can lead to death, which is usually due to respiratory failure due to muscle paralysis. So since it does have neuromuscular effects, it causes all of your muscles to stop working the way they should, including your diaphragm, which is mostly responsible for breathing. So largely death occurs to respiratory failure because you can no longer breathe. Other kind of miscellaneous symptoms include things like muscle stiffness, trouble walking, and excessive salivation, as well as nausea and vomiting. But then again, cause of death is almost always due to respiratory failure. Now, human deaths from larkspur are very rare, if not unheard of. I haven't been able to find anything where humans have actually died from it. Most causes of poisoning are actually livestock, such as cows and sheep. Usually earlier in the spring, where they're sent out to graze and there might be some larkspur growing in the grazing area and they accidentally eat it and then they get sick. So when left untreated, it can actually cause the livestock to die. However, fortunately, there are many antidotes that are effective against larkspur poisoning, including atropine. But yeah, while this is a very, very nice looking plant, just be aware that it is also rather toxic. Let's talk about another poisonous plant, the potato. Now, before you freak out, there's only a few circumstances in which the potatoes are actually poisonous, and just eating regular potatoes is fine. So potatoes are in the Solanaceae family, more commonly known as the nightshades. Now this includes plants such as the poisonous datura and deadly nightshade, as well as things like eggplants and tomatoes. And something that they have in common, all of these plants produce to some level this chemical known as solanine. Now solanine is a natural chemical that's produced as an insecticide as a defense against insects. However, in high enough doses, like present in the deadly nightshade and datura, it is toxic. However, in edible plants like the tomatoes and potatoes, it's not there in a high enough level, usually. Now, in certain cases in potatoes, there is a very high level of solanine, which does make that very toxic to eat. Now, this usually presents itself as very, very bright green coloring underneath the skin of the potato. This is kind of a normal potato. It's yellowish, perhaps with a slight tint of green, but this one has very high levels of solanine, and it shows as being like neon green. If you see a potato like this with very, very bright green under the skin, don't eat it. Now that being said, it is very noticeable, so if you see like a slight tint of green, it's fine, you can eat it. It's just this very bright green, you will not be able to miss it. Now, reportedly, solanine like this can be removed and destroyed by frying the potatoes, not by boiling. However, I personally would still not risk it. The reported oral LD50 of solanine, so when you eat it, is about 590 milligrams per kilogram, which comparatively is not that high, so you don't have a lot to worry about. Now, the symptoms of solanine tend to be largely gastrointestinal, including nausea, vomiting, and cramps, but they can also have other effects such as headaches and dizziness. In some cases, it can cause nightmares and hallucinations, and in severe cases, things such as paralysis, heart problems, and even death. High levels have also been linked to occasional birth defects. And the mechanism of action isn't entirely known currently, but it is thought to affect the mitochondria and mess with some nerve signalings and the calcium channels, and all of that is similar to some other poisons I've gone over before. Now, eating green potatoes is not the only case of solanine poisoning. When potatoes are stored incorrectly, largely in root cellars with very low ventilation, the solanine can be released as a gas. This occurs when the potatoes rot, again due to improper storage. The potatoes begin to decompose and all of that solanine is released as a gas, and if in a poorly ventilated area, it can accumulate and cause very much problems. There have been cases where potatoes have been stored in root cellars, which are underground and therefore have poor ventilation, and are left there for a while so the solanine gas accumulates, and when people go down there after a while, they are exposed to the gas and it causes them to pass out and eventually potentially die due to the poison. Now, this is pretty rare. The majority of people do not own root cellars anymore, and if you have potatoes that are in just like a pantry or something with good ventilation, this isn't really something you need to worry about, and this only happens again when the potatoes are actually rotting. If you just have like older potatoes that have gone like a little bit squishy or are growing the eyes on them, there's not really anything to worry about, again, especially if it's well ventilated. This only really is an issue when in a enclosed space with poor ventilation and actually rotten potatoes, but still not a good time. Let's talk about another poisonous plant, the calla lily. So I'm actually in possession of a calla lily. I have one. She is kind of sad. This is my beautiful daughter. Okay, so to be fair, I bought this bulb from the dollar store like 4 years ago, and I am so surprised that it's still alive. It has never flowered. It almost definitely never will. She's got one leaf. Might have another one coming here. There's an orange tree that I stuck just some seeds from one of my oranges in that I was eating. But this is my calla lily. She is not doing well. But I mean, she's like 4 years old from the dollar store, so I really can't complain that much. So this is kind of how they're supposed to look. This is the flower. This is what she could have looked like. But since we're talking about her, they're poisonous. So compared to other things that I have talked about in my kind of poisonous plant series, calla lilies really aren't that bad. They are quite toxic to cats and dogs and other pets, so be aware of that. If you do have a calla lily, make sure your pet doesn't eat it because it is quite a bit more toxic to them than it is to humans. However, it can still cause some problems with humans. So all parts of the plant have these things called raphides, which are basically calcium oxalate crystals. And what happens if you touch or ingest or whatever, like not touch, like you have to be pretty manhandling it, like if you just touch the leaf it will be fine. But if those crystals get embedded in your skin after touching it or in your mouth after eating it, it can cause a bunch of skin irritation. So kind of like burning or itching or just feeling like your skin feeling bad after ingesting or touching certain parts or enough of the plant, as well as if you ingest enough of the plant, it can cause gastrointestinal issues such as vomiting or diarrhea. However, they're almost like there's very, very, very unlikely to be fatal. So yeah, while being toxic, it's not nearly as bad as some other things. Again, you can buy them from the dollar store, so yeah, they're really not an effective poison, but they're very pretty, and they're just another interesting plant. Here is another poisonous plant, the hellebore, and that is a sick-ass name. This is the hellebore. It is a very pretty plant and a relatively common garden plant. It's used in ornamental purposes, and it's just really cool looking. That definitely looks like a poisonous flower. So all parts of the plant are toxic, with the roots being especially poisonous, so don't go around eating this. So this plant contains toxic alkaloids in it, including renunculin and protoanemalin. I think that's how you say it. Anemonin or anemalin, one of them. Anemonin. That's it. That's the bitch. So these are relatively common garden plants, so most of the poisonings come from accidental ingestion, even though touching them can cause skin irritation. So if you're exposed to the sap on them, then that can cause like your skin to feel not good. So symptoms of hellebore poisoning include pain, like burning in the areas that touched the plant, so skin or mouth or throat, as well as excessive vomiting and salivation, which is not fun, and diarrhea, and intestinal cramps and other problems. There are a few different species of hellebore with slightly different symptoms, but those are common among all of them, and some of the other symptoms include things like vertigo, tinnitus, is that how you say it? Tinnitus, the ringing in your ears and stuff, as well as potentially anaphylaxis, which is not fun, and slowing of the heart, because the alkaloids in here are cardiac glycosides, which means they affect your heart and your heart muscles, and while often not fatal, hellebore poisoning can lead to death due to cardiac arrest, because it just slows your heart muscles down so much. I couldn't find the fatal dose of hellebore, but it is a pretty quickly acting poison, so you will start to feel symptoms in a pretty short amount of time, and those symptoms are not fun. So yeah, let's add this to the list of very pretty plants that are poisonous for you. Let's talk about another poisonous plant, the mandrake plant, and yes, that is a real plant. It is not just made up for Harry Potter. So this is the root of the mandrake plant. Yeah, it looks like that. No, it does not scream. It is a member of the Solanaceae family, so the same family as bitter nightshade, datura, as well as potatoes, tomatoes, eggplant, etc. So it can act as a sedative, a narcotic, and a hallucinogen, and historically it was used as, again, both a sedative and a painkiller. However, since we're talking about it, it is very toxic, and it can kill you. Fun. All parts of the plant are poisonous, and it contains toxic alkaloids called hyoscamine and scopolamine. I think that's how you pronounce it, maybe. So in small doses, this can be narcotic and hallucinogenic. In larger doses, it can cause a bunch of symptoms, such as dizziness, blurry vision, as well as abdominal issues like pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, etc. So not a fun time. Some rare cases, ingesting the mandrake plant can lead to coma, but the most common cause of death due to this is through asphyxiation, so your airways close and then you can't breathe, and it's not a fun time. So, since it can have some benefits such as like sedative and narcotic stuff, it is occasionally found in like those health stores, like you can make like mandrake tea and stuff, and that is kind of where a bunch of accidental poisonings come from, when the dose is too high and instead of having fun hallucinogenic effects, it kills you. Yay! It is treatable, like if you go to a hospital after mandrake poisoning, you can be treated, and so it's less likely that you will die, but it is still a possibility. Don't ingest this, please. They're also where Harry Potter gets the mandrake root stuff from. It used to be a kind of like legend that if you pulled up the plant, it would scream. It doesn't actually. It might just poison you instead. Here's more fun and interesting plants. Let's talk about mistletoe. This video probably should have been saved until December, but that's a long time away, so I'm not doing that. You get it in... what month is it? July. To start off, this is not mistletoe. This is holly. A ton of people, especially in like art and movies and stuff, put this plant in it and call it mistletoe, but it is actually holly. It is not mistletoe. It does look more Christmassy and whatever than actual mistletoe, but no, this is holly. I see this all over in like movies and TV shows, and it drives me nuts. This is not mistletoe. This is mistletoe. This is the stuff that people hang up, and if you walk under it, somebody kisses you. For people that are into that and have romantic inclinations. So, yeah, this is mistletoe, and it is a very, very interesting plant. So, mistletoe is actually one of the few plants that are fully parasitic. Lots of other plants can be like, not semi-parasitic, but like different forms of parasitic, like for example, kudzu, which I recently learned I have been pronouncing incorrectly. I think I called it kuzdu before, but kudzu. That is what is called structural parasite, where it relies on other plants for structure. So, like, it has to climb up them in order to, like, spread fully and, like, get closer to sunlight, etc., etc. But it doesn't rely on the host plants for nutrients. I just totally lost my train of thought. But mistletoe is fully parasitic. So this is a larger mistletoe plant growing on a host tree, and mistletoe has a specially evolved roots that are able to actually tap into the host plant's bark and stem and all of that to be able to actually suck nutrients out of the host plant. So basically, the mistletoe gets transported from like to a new tree, usually in seeds by like birds and stuff. Like it just gets there, and it starts to sprout, and it sends its roots into the host tree and infiltrates the not cardiovascular, but the like circulatory system of the tree and starts to grow there. Then, using the roots it's put into the circulatory tree, it gets water and nutrients from that host tree, in addition to carrying out some photosynthesis, but to a lesser degree than other plants. If the host plant has a large enough mistletoe infestation, then that can actually cause permanent damage or even death to the host plant, which in turn kills the mistletoe because it can no longer get all of the nutrients it needs from the host plant because the host plant is dead. Good job, mistletoe. In addition to being parasitic, mistletoe is actually toxic to humans to some degree. All parts of this plant are toxic when ingested, so that includes the leaves, stems, and berries, so you do not want to be eating this. As far as I'm aware, it is safe to touch and handle, so you can still hang this up if you want. It does not cause skin irritation, but you very much do not want it to be ingested, so you probably don't want this around if you have pets or small children that are prone to eating things that they're not supposed to be. Mistletoe plants contain some poisonous protein compounds called phototoxin and viscotoxin, which are not things you want to be ingesting. They are vasoconstrictors, and basically what that means is it constricts your blood vessels, so it tightens them, making them go smaller, so from like this to this, which restricts blood flow, which causes like things like oxygen and nutrients to be transported throughout the bloodstream a lot slower. So, symptoms of mistletoe poisoning includes a lot of stomach issues, so just basically stomach pains, as well as nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. So, overall, not fun. Additionally, large enough doses, while almost never fatal, there's very, very few cases of fatalities due to mistletoe, it can cause things such as there's been links to seizures, as well as hallucinations and heart problems. The heart problems caused by the vasoconstriction, so your heart's not doing things it should. It's not sending the blood places that it should be, so cardiac arrest due to the vasoconstriction. So yeah, while not fatal, it's definitely a thing you don't want to eat. However, it is still a very interesting plant. Merry Christmas in July. Let's talk about more poisonous plants because I think they're fun. So this is water hemlock, and it is known as the most poisonous plant in North America. So it's just a very inconspicuous looking plant. It's just kind of there. It's just this little white plant. On its own, it wouldn't seem like that much of a problem. Nobody's just seeing this on the ground being yep, I want to eat that. But there are problems that arise when it gets confused with Queen Anne's lace. This is Queen Anne's lace, and it looks very similar to water hemlock. However, this is actually edible. The flowers can be boiled to make tea, and the roots are pretty similar to just carrots. Most, or not most, but quite a few hemlock poisoning occurrences happen when water hemlock, poisonous, is confused for Queen Anne's lace, edible. So people who are aware of Queen Anne's lace and the fact that it's edible, but may not be aware of water hemlock and the fact that it looks very similar, may see this plant and be like, oh sick, I know what that is, that's Queen Anne's lace, and take it home and eat it and then die. This is also called hemlock, but it is a type of coniferous tree, and as far as I'm aware, they're not poisonous. These aren't closely related to water hemlock at all, beyond them both being plants and called hemlock, both of them. As far as I'm aware, the tree is not poisonous or toxic or anything, but don't quote me on that. Google didn't tell me anything conclusive about that. So don't go around eating this anyway. Don't eat unfamiliar plants, but as far as I know, the tree hemlock is not toxic. So anyways, water hemlock is this one, and it is poisonous. It also contains toxic alkaloids similar to the compounds found in oleander, and has pretty similar symptoms to oleander poisoning. It also causes problems with the nerves, and more specifically the nerves that go to your muscles, so your muscles stop working. However, instead of mostly the cardiac muscles being affected like in oleander, this one has a big effect on respiratory muscles. The main toxic alkaloid in these water hemlock plants is conine, which again affects the nervous system and causes symptoms such as tremors and shaking, difficulty breathing, respiratory failure, and may lead to death if not treated properly. It also works faster than— fuck off with your loud music, nobody gives a shit. Anyway, it works faster than the oleander plant with, it can be toxic anywhere between 20 minutes to 3 hours. Oleander takes a lot faster. Other symptoms include things like vomiting and nausea, just all over shaking and difficulty controlling movements, as well as potentially respiratory and kidney or kidney failure, coma, and death. Fortunately, depending on the situation, water hemlock can be treated relatively easily in the hospital if caught before the symptoms become too much of a problem, as well as if a small enough amount of this is eaten. Also, it's not deadly just to touch, it has to be ingested in order for symptoms to show. Just touching it is not toxic, it won't. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't cause any skin irritation or absorption of toxins through the skin. As far as I'm aware, it does have to be ingested in order to cause symptoms. So what is considered to be a toxic dose of water hemlock is 150 to 300 milligrams of conine, which is about 6 to 8 leaves of this plant. So yeah, if you see what you think is Queen Anne's lace, you have to make absolutely 100% sure that it is in fact Queen Anne's lace and not water hemlock before ingesting any part of that plant. Here is another poisonous plant, the tobacco plant. Now, it's probably not surprising that tobacco is considered to be very toxic due to the fact that pretty much everyone knows that it contains a very high level of nicotine. Now, nicotine isn't only found in tobacco, it actually is found in pretty much every other member of the Solanaceae family or the nightshade family, so that includes deadly nightshade as well as edible plants like she's alive. She's just letting you know she's fine. That also includes edible plants such as tomatoes and potatoes, so they do have very low levels of nicotine. The tobacco plants are known for having very high levels of nicotine, which is what you make cigarettes and stuff out of. That is the kind of addictive and toxic chemical found in cigarettes. Oh, hi, Sooty. Is it too windy out there for ya? Sooty and Scout. Now, nicotine works on a couple very specific receptors in the brain called nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. My sister, stop moving lower if you don't want them to see your face. I'm sorry. My sister wants to show off the sweater she got. Spin. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Flex. Anyways, nicotine binds to that specific nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, which triggers a excess release of acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a very important neurotransmitter, has many functions throughout the entire body. Now, nicotine also stimulates the dopaminergic system, which is kind of what causes dopamine to be released. Now, dopamine is one of the happy chemicals, so that is one of the reasons why nicotine is so addictive. It causes extra dopamine to be released, which makes your body and brain happy, and you get addicted to the thing that makes it come out more. However, high enough concentrations of nicotine can be very toxic, which is how we get back around to the tobacco plant being poisonous. All parts of the tobacco plant are very poisonous, including the stems, the leaves, and the flowers, the flower buds, and everything. The whole thing has a lot of poison in it. This isn't the most toxic plant, because if it was, you wouldn't be able to smoke it, but it does still have some pretty nasty side effects in high enough concentration. Now, symptoms of tobacco or nicotine poisoning have a variety of side effects, including gastrointestinal, such as cramps and nausea, even vomit. But its other issues are due to the excess release of acetylcholine, and that can cause things such as increased heart rate, which can later cause problems, as well as muscle paralysis and twitching, because acetylcholine helps control your muscle. And there can also be trouble breathing, which can be one of the causes of death. Now, increased rate of breathing is kind of the main sign of nicotine poisoning and is also usually the cause of death due to respiratory failure. Now, direct poisoning from tobacco plants themselves usually isn't that common. Just a singular tobacco plant doesn't have enough poison to really do any harm, and cigarettes, while dangerous, don't do that, don't smoke, kids. Cigarettes also, just a few of them, don't actually have enough nicotine in them to cause an overdose or any direct poisoning. They just have other bad effects, so don't smoke. So you are unlikely to be poisoned by touching or eating or just being around a tobacco plant. In fact, people often have them as houseplants or to cultivate themselves. However, there is a thing called green tobacco poisoning, which is a phenomenon that was observed in tobacco field workers, where they would be exposed to a lot of tobacco plants. And nicotine and other toxins found in these plants can actually absorb through the skin. It's been found, so when these workers were out collecting tobacco without gloves, without protective wear, they would absorb enough nicotine and other toxins through their skin to actually get something called the green tobacco sickness. So overall, a single, regular, fresh tobacco plant will not kill you, but smoking will.